Okay.
Did you get it?
I think so. Hi, this is the Conscious Living Show, and we're getting started tonight. The Conscious Living Show, thinking consciously, living consciously, trying to wake up to our lives. And so tonight, Mark and I would like to chat with you a little bit about seeking the truth and what does that look like for you? What's that look like for us? And how do we decide what is fact, what is fiction? Because I've always said you would make a great judge because you're like super fair and you always look at all sides of the story and try to seek the common denominator as well as the truth.
I love it when you talk math.
I know. Look at you. That's your foreplay, huh?
I should have worn my math shirt.
Your math shit. Yeah.
Very good, love.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's important to be logical. We live in a real world. It's good to be dealing with reality.
Yeah, reality. So as people are coming into both, we're on the YouTube channel, the Conscious Living Show. If you want to find our YouTube channel, and you can see all of our shows that we've done before this, and cat going crazy. And then we're also on Facebook at Nan Pierce. And hold on, let me take care of my kitty cat over here. So if you're on Facebook or YouTube, pipe in the comment section, please, and let us know you're listening and maybe where you're from and how you seek truth, if you have a question or if you have a technique that you use for seeking the truth. Because right now we're inundated with, all kinds of truths, right?
Well, the first thing is it's important to differentiate truth from opinion. I think that's what you want to avoid. It's like one of those telephone calls, or games you play where one person says, gives you a sentence and then you repeat it to the next and you repeat it to the next, and by the time it gets to the other end, it comes out pretty different. And that's what happens with opinions, is they keep changing to meet the person's expectations, and
right.
And they really have very little to do with reality after they've gone a few renditions. So you want to make sure that you're working with data and that you're doing your own analysis rather than depending on someone else's opinion. Now, an opinion might strike an interest, might make you say, hey, that's pretty cool.
It's an interesting opinion. Yeah. But like, that saying goes about opinions, everybody's got one, right? And so right now, a lot of the media that we have access to that calls itself news isn't always news. It's oftentimes people's opinion, and they're oftentimes going with a popular opinion that gets ratings. So I think we want to be mindfully discerning about what people are saying, and if it's fact checkable. There's many fact checking sites that you can go to where people who are apolitical, they really are just trying to seek truth and find sources for truth. But it takes a little time. It takes an interest in really trying to understand the truth. And I'm a big advocate of trying not to share things that I don't know are valid. I think there's a lot of dissemination of untruths that frankly have created some major destruction across our planet. And so now is the time, we have a new year, 2021. We're at the beginning of a new era. And so I think this is a great time to kick it up a notch in terms of being responsible.
Well, in the United States here, we have a new administration, and we're all hopeful that we'll start moving in a positive direction together. And that's going to require us to be able to understand all of these different concerns that people have. And we want to make sure that we don't spread our opinion as fact. It is fun to see if a lot of people agree with you, or if you feel like you're on the right side of an argument. But when you give your opinion, somebody else shouldn't take that and run with it. They should go back to the original argument.
And I think it's always safe to say, in my opinion, blah, 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 blah. We all can have opinions. That's part of the free speech, is we can have opinions. But oftentimes, people that are in positions of power and influence make these comments without validity. And so we really want to be careful. There's a lot of nutty information out there that
Well,
is not healthy for us
it's
as a people.
it's become more difficult because of the internet, and yet the internet has brought us all closer together. We can exchange ideas,
Right.
concepts, opinions, but we have to make sure that we don't believe that they're facts uh, for sure. Um, that's a lot of the news shows are starting to express opinions more than they are actually creating and delivering the facts.
Yeah, I think a lot of journalists have left the field because it's become such a opinionated field rather than a journalistic field. And there's a big difference between a journalist who really seeks pieces of a puzzle and they present those pieces and they leave it up to the audience to decide and where to go from there, and they give sources and they give information, whereas a lot of these um, uh, theatrical opinion hosts, they're not journalists. They're not telling you the truth. They're telling what they need to tell for their network to get ratings, to get advertising, to make money. And it's not about elevating our knowledge at all. It's really about kind of depressing it and stealing away the common sense approach to life. And they've pitted a lot of people against each
Well,
other.
and they're pretty good at disguising opinion from data. They'll present some data and then pretty quickly overwhelm you with their opinion. So just that's really the first step in getting more reality based, is just to be able to discern between data and opinion and how it's being presented. A lot of news sites on the internet, you have to read a specific site for several weeks or months to be able to develop some trust. See how often they, not just that they kind of speak to you in terms of what your beliefs are, but how much you can believe the data that they're giving you. I have the same problem with medical journals. There's different layers. There's some that are much more scientific, a lot more out there that are more casual, and you just need to know which ones you're reading and which ones are striking, that kind of make sense to you.
Yeah. So, like, if you read a headline for something that says, you know, uh, you know, Donald Duck is not really a duck. Donald Duck is a mouse. Um, do you just believe that headline?
Not sure how to continue that analogy, but because it breaks one of my rules, which is things should be kind of continuous in the sense that ducks and mice don't become one another very easily. So it would be hard for me to see that. And I think that, well, that does point out that if something's more incremental in terms of its change, it's a little easier to believe that than if it's a huge leap. If somebody says, wow,
Mm.
wow, somebody's landed on Mars, you kind of go, well, wait a minute, that's a bit of a leap to believe that somebody's landed on Mars.
Right, but you understand that there are headlines like that out there every day that people just read the headline and they believe that because it's in writing, it's true.
Well, and it can be on a nice website that looks very formal and
Right.
official, and then they can start to back up their claims with some pretty interesting speak. But really, trust your judgment and intuition. If it's the old saying, if it's too good of a deal, it probably is.
Right.
Be careful. And I think the same thing applies with news. If it's too outlandish, you need to do more work to prove that it's true. If it's something that's just incremental, then maybe you don't need to do as much work to believe it.
Yeah. There was a documentary that came out this last year that was very professionally done. It was done by a person that was a great filmmaker and had every appearance of being an authentic documentary. And people watch this documentary and believed everything in it without doing any research. And I found that it took me about 5 minutes on the internet to find a plethora of sources, reliable sources, scientific sources from all over the world that debunked every single thing in this film.
Yeah.
And yet it went viral so fast and was so destructive that the social media platforms and the internet had to actually remove it, which that something has gone way far off the deep end for the internet to remove something.
Well, and I think that was a great strategy because the documentary filmmakers have become more and more helpful and more valued recently in the last 10 years. And so, even though some of their claims are somewhat outlandish at times, but they have kind of gotten more widespread. And so making it seem that way, like it was, but wasn't really a documentary, was definitely a good way to fool people. I think it's one thing to kind of express your own values and kind of whoops and go and slide into opinion, but when you do it for um, not for the good of the world,
for power or profit.
Yeah, if you're doing it and you have a sinister kind of reason for doing it, and I think a lot of times they do.
Yeah.
That's when you really have to be careful.
Definitely. So for now, I think what I'd like to do is to have our listeners, and I'm going to compile a source of sources, so that we all have a very easily accessible list of sources that we can use to fact check different things, fact check comments, headlines, scientific data. And maybe next time you could talk a little bit about, because we send a lot of people to scientific data now. The White House has promised to have a science and health press conference 3 times a week. So they're likely to be presenting a lot more scientific data about the virus and vaccines and these type of things that sometimes for people that have no science experience are very difficult to kind of sift through. So maybe you could talk about some highlights next time for people to look at, so that they can understand, like, what is the source. It's like when a source is cited, like Breitbart, that's not a reliable source, or Newsmax, or the New York Post. There's a lot of sources out there they're like tabloids, and you wouldn't take your scientific information from Cosmopolitan or some of these other sources that aren't journals. So
reputation is everything, and I
Yes.
think that's where you start off. Now I like how you've learned to fact check, and one of the things that would be interesting for people to understand how these data sources are not helpful. Obviously, we just had an election, and there was a lot of concern about whether it was fair. And many, many, many news stations came on and said, it was fair, it wasn't fair, it was fair, it wasn't fair. But very few of those news stations actually reported the data that was easily available on the websites of the government agencies that redid the recounts. And one piece of data that was touted a lot was that more people voted than registered. And that would fit with some people bringing in ballots that weren't creased in the envelope the right way. And it created all of this doubt and suspicion. And yet the data was very easily available on the websites. This many people registered, this many people voted for each state.
Mm-hmm.
So
each county.
By omitting that, they, in a sense, didn't want to speak to the truth so that their opinions would not be challenged. Right. So at some point, you've got to go back to the source and make sure that you're looking at the data. So as soon as you're getting an opinion, say, oh, that's an opinion, I'm going to go back to the data.
Well, and any reputable journalist if they print something or state something that later is found to not be true, they are courageous enough and respectable enough to come forward and say, I need to retract that. You see in reputable journals retractions all the time and corrections. So it's like when we know better, we do better. And I think that's important that we look for those signs of people actually taking back what they said and correcting it and owning that. To me, that tells somebody has respect for their profession.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we learned recently is that just because a lot of people believe something that they've heard is true, don't be part of that herd mentality. That's where you have to be careful about becoming part of that by repeating it. And Nancy really on the internet, I mean, she snopes a lot of things to make
Well,
sure, because
there's tons of
there's a lot of sites out there that will help you get more information about a claim or even a fact that isn't correct. And you don't want to be passing those things on, because a lot of people start believing, well, everybody in my town believes that there are Martians, and why wouldn't I believe that there's a Martian?
Right.
And the herd mentality is very powerful. It's just another example of peer pressure, and mob and riots can develop out of this.
Out of the mob mind, yeah.
In fact, we've just experienced that with the storming of the Capitol. I think those people got in there, and then they were saying, well, why are we here? Well, I'll take a picture of the statue. Now, some other people had more sinister ideas, and then, I mean, it had no purpose. It was not going to succeed. They got, a lot of them got stirred up and caught up in the moment, and yet they did a lot of destruction, and a person died as a result of that.
Five.
So you can't, yeah, exactly. But, the one person definitely, I mean, being struck and hit.
Yeah.
I don't have as much information about the others, but you want to be careful about what you repeat, and you want to be responsible and go back to the sources so that you make sure that you're not spreading rumors and start making them sound like they're really true. I think that's a key thing.
And when I do my fact checking, I like to fact check the same thing on like 3 or 4 different sources to see if there's some commonality, because there are some, people say Snopes is left leaning, and there's some that are more right leaning. So I'll look for some different sources that might hit both sides of the aisle and give some kind of resources for their fact checking. But it takes time, and you have to be, for me, it's like you have to be invested in seeking the truth. If you're not invested in seeking the truth, then please don't spread the lies. Just stop them right with you. If you read it and you want to believe it, that's completely your prerogative. But don't share something that you don't absolutely know is true. And when we do that, because chances are we will, if we're just quickly retweeting or sharing things, own it. Just go, man, I didn't fact check that. And so when somebody comes back with a fact check that debunks what you've said, so thank you for sharing that with me. I'm going to look into it further so that we educate ourselves. Because the more we know, the better we can do, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Yep. So what have we done here tonight? We've talked about trying to discern the truth from opinion. And if you're hearing opinion, you want to be careful about spreading opinions
as if it were truth.
As if it were truth.
Right.
And we don't want to create the mob herd mentality. If everybody believes it, then I'd be silly not to believe it. Concept. We don't want that to happen.
And read beyond headlines before you share things, because the headlines are designed to trigger an emotional response in you. Boy, and sometimes the headline, really the body of the product, it's completely contradictory to the headline.
I run into that every day when it says she should be arrested for wearing this dress.
Who?
And then I click on it, and There's nothing there.
Yeah, you like the, you're easy on the clickbait. You know that they do that on purpose, right?
Wow, they're just not being truthful here. I mean,
No.
and it's incredible the
Well,
creativity.
you think about, I mean, advertising is designed to not be truthful.
Well, that's another area.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have to realize that advertising is designed by people that understand human psychology, and they know exactly how to manipulate you to do what they want you to do with that information. So, if it's going to trigger an emotional response, they know you're going to share it as fact. If they trigger you some kind of insecurity, they know you're going to buy their product to make you feel more secure. So it's all a head game. We just have to be mindful.
Another way of moving through information is to be asking questions. So when you ask a friend, or what do you think about this electric vehicle, you could say, well, I've got a lot of questions about it, and you could share your questions, which would generate interest. And if you put a statement in the form of a question, nobody will misunderstand it as an opinion or a fact. But it could have some impact, because if enough people are asking the same question, then the manufacturer of the electronic vehicles probably should try to answer that question. And one of the questions that should be asked is, how efficient are these cars that we're coming up with, and how much do they cost to drive a mile? And the manufacturers aren't really coming forward with that so much. And of course, we're all worried about being able to gas up that electric car on the road. And so there's plenty of stations coming out, but how much does it cost to gas up that car?
So we don't gas up an electric car. So
That's
what
right.
do we call it? Charge up.
Yeah, charge it up.
Yeah.
You got me on that one.
Because you never have to worry about running out of gas.
Well, but we drive down the freeway, and we'll pull into a gas station that's 5 cents a gallon less, because we know we have a big tank and it's going to cost us a couple bucks for the same thing. But nobody sees any signs out that says how much electricity costs to charge up your car.
Oh, that's true, huh?
No. Mm-hmm. So ask questions instead of spreading opinions of others. You certainly have the right to express your opinion, but don't spread opinions of others, because it'll just snowball and become a riot.
In the last few minutes of our show, I'd like to talk about the idea of free speech. And when we're looking for truth, and when disinformation becomes truly destructive and dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of people have complained about Trump having his Twitter account taken down and all of his social media taken away from him, as if that were violating his right to free speech. But nowhere in free speech does it say that you can incite violence and harm against other people, and that that's okay. And so, and also, the free speech really was designed not for how abusive we can be to each other, but that we could speak out against our government. That's really what the design is for, so that we, the people, still had the voice, that the government had to take our criticism. But to incite an insurrection and violence and harm and murder and hanging and destruction of property and other people is not okay. That's a terrorist act. And so understand that there's a big difference. It wasn't just that one person was speaking their opinion truth. They were, with power and charge, getting other people to do their dirty work. So
well, and that's really what we've been talking about, is don't let yourself be manipulated by opinions and false information that other people have an agenda with. Just pause and say, gosh, is there any reality to this? Does it make any sense at all?
Yeah. So use your free speech to hold your elected officials accountable for doing the right thing, for following the law, for following their oath. That is what our free speech is intended for, is to let these officials know that we've put in office, that work for us based on our tax dollars, that they have a job to do, and that they need to uphold their oath to the Constitution, not to a person. And I think that's pretty critical.
Yeah. I think that's exactly it. I mean, we all want to be able to express and ask questions of our government without any fear of repercussions, but that doesn't mean we can storm the government and incite people to do otherwise. Yeah.
And on a personal note, when we talk about truth and seeking truth from our people that we're in relationships with, that requires that we be able to handle the truth that they're going to give us, and that we handle it in a way that sets the tone for that person to feel safe and welcomed to speak their truth in the future. You know, one shoot down of a person telling us their truth, because sometimes it's hard to speak your truth even to somebody that you're in a long-standing intimate relationship with, if you're a little worried about being rejected or judged. And so as the listener and the recipient of another person's truth, how we handle that truth will determine if we get any more. So step by step, we need to make sure we set the tone for being able to handle truth.
It is really hard to stop these live sessions, because we go from one topic to another, and it gets more interesting. And I think that certainly when you're in a relationship and you're speaking your truth, you don't want judgment. But I think that also covers a lot of other situations in the Black Lives Matters movement. They want to speak their truth, and they want to be heard without judgment, because that is their experience, and they're giving you very valuable information about how they feel. And to try to tell them that they don't feel that way,
or they shouldn't,
or shouldn't feel that way, or haven't had those experiences, is not logical. And if you do, they'll quit confiding in you, and then you won't have that information, and that's not how we move forward. So, So you have to be careful about being judgmental when somebody's speaking the truth.
Yeah. Oh, bless you. Okay, so that's COVID. Did you say
COVID?
People are being cough shamed and sneeze shamed, and that's terrible.
There's some pretty funny jokes about that.
Yeah.
But I've been vaccinated, so I don't have much to worry about.
Yeah, you only have a 5% chance, right?
That's right. That's right.
So I'm only 70% safe right now.
Yeah.
So
we
should wear our masks.
I'll take the risk. I'm not covering up with you.
Okay. Nothing?
Nothing.
Okay.
Don't have to.
Thanks for the.
We're going down.
For the share.
Going down with the ship.
Yeah. Okay.
Not that I think you're a ship.
Thank you. Well, did you call ships cheese, right?
That's right.
Yeah, because they're fun to ride. They're a little bit bouncy.
They're safe.
They're safe. All right. So if you have any questions or comments about this show, please send me an email to drnancy@drnsp.com. And Mark and I will be happy to answer you. What
do you usually say at the end of the show?
Oh, well, are we at the end?
Yes.
Okay. So since we're at the end of the show, every day you wake up, you get to decide whether you're a warning or you're an example.
Excellent. So be an example and don't spread false rumors.
Great. Do your fact checking.
Do the work.
All right. You're going to end that one? And
Sure.
I'll end this one? Okay. So have a great week, and we'll see you next Monday, same time, maybe a little different station here. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.